The world is a drastically different place now than it was when we were kids, and even more so when compared to our parents' and our grandparents' childhoods. But what are the reasons for that change?
In the first of a series of 4 reports, our Matt Behrens looks at how advances in technology have changed almost every aspect of our everyday lives and why this is a generation of change.
As I became a historian, I started thinking about my grandmother, who was born in 1889. And I kept thinking of the changes that she had seen in her lifetime.
And as people in the late 19th and early 20th century grew and matured, so too did the world around them. In fact, when you look back now at the amount of technology that has sprung up over the past century and a half, it's nearly breathtaking.
If you think about the railroads in the mid-19th century, the rise of big business, automobiles in the early 20th century, electric power, the computer age, the information age more recently, there have been really some remarkable changes in ordinary life that Americans have experienced, and it's changed almost everything that we do and we think and we feel.
And one of those changes is the way new developments have made everyday life a much easier process.
You could point to convenience as being one of the biggest differences, that in the 19th century life took a lot of work. If they want energy, if they want to stay warm in the winter, they have to go and cut down some trees and stack firewood all summer. That was an enormous amount of work. We now have this lifestyle that's push-button convenience. If we want it to be warmer, we dial up the thermostat. Those sorts of things have really revolutionized life at home, and it's begun to change the way people think, changes their attitudes, changes the way they look at the natural world.
For example, a trip from Wausau to Stevens Point for people living a century ago would be a massive undertaking. But technology also drastically changed the way they look at distance.
The world's much smaller now, even though it's the same space it always was, and we have many more people than we ever did before.
Sexauer says in 1907 there were 143 paved roads in the U.S., and automobiles were a rarity, which meant people looking to travel from Wausau didn't have many options besides waiting at the local railroad station and hoping its schedule matched theirs.
Nowadays, you hop on an airplane and you're there in no time. And even with the superhighways that we have, the getting from place to place is a lot easier.
But while improvements in travel have made it much easier to get where you're going, other gains have made it less necessary than ever to need to.
Go all the way back to the telegraph in the 19th century. One historian has called that the Victorian Internet, because it had essentially the same effect. It took a world where communication was difficult and often took weeks, and it made communication instantaneous in the same way that the Internet has.
Telephone, radio, television, talking motion pictures, the computer, all of those things have been able to connect us to other people and to a common culture, a common understanding of what's going on.
And with all the technological jumps we've made in the recent past, the historians I spoke with say it's clear that the world is changing and will continue to do so.
Things have happened, especially in the last 15 years, that have drastically changed the world in bringing us much closer together. I would like to think that 20 years from now things are going to be totally different, and you and I are going to wonder, how did that happen so quickly?
Matt Behrens for NewsChannel 7.
Be sure to tune in next Friday for part 2 of the series, where we take a look at the changes in popular music and how it reflects the way people's attitudes and morals have changed.
Great way to wrap up the week all month long.
Best decade for music? The 80s.
The 80s,
of course.
Yeah.